In the early spring of 1922, on a remote farm in southern Germany, a series of strange and brutal murders took place, and unsettling events began to unfold. Events that would soon lead to one of the most chilling
and mysterious mass murders in European history. The farm was known as Hinterkaifeck, an isolated property
located miles away from the nearest village. It was home to 6 people: Andreas Gruber, his wife Cecilia, their widowed daughter Victoria, Victoria's 2 young children, and a newly hired maid who had arrived. Days before the murders, Andreas Gruber began noticing something deeply disturbing.
He discovered a set of footprints in the fresh snow, leading from the nearby forest toward the house.
But what made this discovery terrifying was that there were no footprints leading back into the forest. Someone had approached the farm and never left. At first, Andreas may have tried to rationalize what he saw.
But then, other strange occurrences followed. He reported hearing footsteps in the attic during the night,
as if someone was moving above the family while they slept. Tools began to go missing, only to later reappear in different places. Even more unsettling, a newspaper arrived at the house that no one in the family had subscribed to. It was as though an unseen presence had already made its way into their lives. Despite these warning signs, the family did not leave the farm. On March 31st, 1922, the family hired a new maid to replace their previous housekeeper. The property was haunted, or so they claimed. But the new maid, she had no idea. You need to understand what she was walking into. Within hours of her arrival, she too would become a victim.
That night, something happened inside Hinterkaifeck. The following days passed quietly. Neighbors noticed that the family
had not been seen, but given the isolated nature of the farm, this did not immediately raise alarm.
However, small signs began to suggest something was wrong. The family's mail went uncollected.
Smoke continued rising from the chimney, suggesting someone was still tending the fire. Animals in the barn
were being fed regularly. It wasn't until April 4th that neighbors decided to investigate. When they entered the property, they made a discovery that would haunt investigators for decades. Inside the barn, they found 4 members of the family brutally murdered. Their bodies had been carefully covered with hay, almost as if someone had tried to conceal them. Further searches inside the house, we found the bodies. They were covered with hay, almost as if someone had tried to conceal them. The motive, the weapon they used. They were looking for something specific, a tool of the trade. They used a mattock. The attacks were violent, yet strangely controlled. Investigators believed the victims had been lured one by one to the barn before being murdered, suggesting the killer was patient and deliberate. But what truly disturbed authorities was what happened after the murders. Evidence indicated that the killer remained on the farm
for several days after the crime. The animals were fed, meals were prepared. Someone had even slept
in the house. This meant the murderer had not fled immediately, but instead stayed among the victims. The suspect vanished as if nothing happened. We launched an extensive search. One of the primary theories focused on someone familiar with the family. The isolated location made it unlikely that a random stranger committed the crime without prior knowledge of the property. Suspicion quickly turned toward individuals connected to Victoria, including former acquaintances and potential romantic interests. Another theory suggested a disgruntled, "For 3 years I've been looking for him. He worked with us." Yet despite numerous interrogations and leads, no one could be definitively linked. The case became even more complicated due to the lack of preserved evidence. The crime scene was not properly secured by modern standards, and many people had entered the property before investigators arrived, contaminating potential clues. Over time, more theories emerged. Some believed the killer were hiding in the attic for days before the murders, explaining the footsteps Andreas reported. Others suggested it was a botched robbery, driven by financial motives, as the family was known to have some wealth. There were even rumors of dark family secrets, including strained relationships and hidden conflicts. One suspect reportedly made a deathbed confession years later, but without evidence, the claim could not be verified. Another individual was investigated decades after. Crime based on new witness statements, yet again, nothing could be proven. The Hinterkaifeck murders remain solved to this day. What makes this case so deeply unsettling is not just the violence, but its implications.
The eerie sense of presence. The idea that someone may have been living inside the house.
I saw him that night, waiting, in the snow. Footprints everywhere. Just the ticking of a clock in the attic. The unexplained newspaper time. All of it suggests the family may not have been alone in their final days. Even now, over a century later, the story continues to disturb those who hear it. A quiet farm,
Hidden from the world, where something unthinkable happened in the silence of the night. 6 lives lost.
no confirmed killer, no clear motive, and one terrifying possibility still lingers. Whoa, what if the murderer is already inside the house, long before anyone realized it? The fields of Hinterkaifeck have long since changed, the original farm no longer standing. But the mystery remains buried in history, waiting for answers that may never come. And somewhere within that story lies a chilling truth, that sometimes the most dangerous threat is not the one approaching from outside, but the one already living within.